Hello everyone. Welcome to today's session on LS Central POS customization. Today I will walk you through how to design an end-to-end customization in the POS using POS panels, custom commands, and other functionalities. So this video mainly focuses on the creation of an entirely new functionality, which is the creation of purchase order from the POS interface. So we will see how we design the POS screen and how the internal commands and code execute. Now, this is a two-part training. In this video, we will focus on designing the POS panel, integrating the vendor and item lookups, displaying the vendor details, and designing the panel. In the next video, we will cover the creation of PO lines, modifying the PO lines, adding additional courier fees, as well as posting and printing of purchase orders. So let's dive into part 1. First and foremost, when creating a new POS feature, we have to design the POS panel itself. This is the normal user interface that you see for sales transactions. You have to create a similar kind of interface or new interface where you will select the item, select the vendor, and select the quantity. You can modify the quantity and even add additional features as part of it. Some parts also require displaying data. For example, in sales transaction, you can see the receipt number. Similarly, for purchase orders, you might want to see the document number. For that reason, we have designed a POS panel. Let me open that panel and explain the design of the POS panel itself. Then we will break the panel into different sections and go through each part. Let's break the panel into 3 different sections. At the top, you can see the vendor number, document number, vendor name, email, etc. We will consider this the information panel. On the right hand side, you can see different menus such as vendor lookup, item lookup, quantity, payment, get vendor email, and post. This is what we consider the menu panel. In the center, you can see item details for the products that you have selected for the particular vendor or order. We will add this list of products from the item lookup and change the quantities as per our needs. So these are the 3 different components: information panel, menu panel, and general details panel. The information panel is where you will have the vendor details, document number, and vendor email. The menu panel is the place where you will have the actions like vendor lookup, item lookup, post, get email, quantity, etc. The general details panel will show the selected items and their quantities. So it is very easy to understand because it is similar to the standard POS panel. Now let's go ahead and see how we are able to create this whole panel. We will break it down into sections: how we created the panel card, how we added the information panel, how we added the menu panel, and how we added the general details panel. We'll break everything down and review it step by step. First, let's think about the prerequisites for creating the panel. For PO creation, we need a staging table where we can save details like vendor number, document number, vendor name, email, and products selected for the purchase order. So we will have staging tables like PO header staging and PO line staging. These tables will capture the data and store it temporarily. We will also need a code unit to load the panel. In previous lessons, we learned that for a customer order panel, we have a code unit associated with the panel and other functionalities are part of that code unit. Similarly, we have a dedicated code unit for this panel. Let's also think about the criteria or scenario for developing this feature. Each store can order items only for specific vendors that are assigned to that vendor. Inventory availability will be checked using a dynamic inventory functionality. We will generate a document number and display it on the screen. Vendor details will also be populated on the screen. When we post the document, we will design a POS receipt specially for this order so that it prints vendor details and item details. These are the high-level requirements we will consider while developing this feature. Please note that in this lesson, we will use all the topics covered in earlier modules. If you missed any topics, please review them before proceeding. Now let's go ahead with the creation of a new POS panel. Go to the POS panel page, click New to create a new POS panel, select the profile. For this training, I will select Training. Define the controller ID, which will be used later in the code when loading the panel. For this module, I will use tr_purchase. Then define a row and columns. As I explained earlier, we need a code unit that loads this panel and contains other functionalities. Here we have the control lines. As discussed earlier, we divided the panel into 3 parts: information panel, menu panel, and general details panel. The button pads are the menus or display buttons shown on the panel. Let me open the vendor information panel first. For information panels and menu panels, we use button pads. For that, we create POS menus. Here you can see we created a POS menu under the training profile. This menu has 3 columns and 2 rows. In the button pads, we use POS tags. These multi-use POS tags load data dynamically. For example, vendor number, multi-use info text 1, document number, multi-use header 1, vendor name, multi-use info text 2, email address, multi-use info text 3. Similarly, we have the menu panel. We created another POS menu for the menu panel. Here we defined 1 column and 7 rows. This means we have 7 buttons displayed vertically on the right side. You can see we added all the commands in the description. These commands are registered with the code unit associated with this POS panel. Normally we register these commands in POS external commands. So we go to the POS commands. All the commands are registered there. We can delete and recreate them if necessary. We have mapped all the POS commands according to our needs. If you want to move buttons up or down, you can adjust them according to your design. Now let's move on to the data grid, which represents the general details panel. You can see that I selected table 50021, which is the POS lines staging table. This is the staging table we discussed earlier. Whatever items are selected will be inserted into this temporary table. Later, we will move the data to the actual purchase order tables. This concept is similar to POS transactions where we stage the data first and then move it to the final tables. We also select the fields that should appear in this list. You can add or remove fields depending on the requirement. For example, I created a column called inventory but did not map it directly to a field. On the right hand side, you can see the source expression ID. I will explain this shortly when we discuss lookups. This completes high-level panel creation. There are some additional prerequisites when executing panel commands. For example, we need configurations for lookup list, lookup cards, and POS data tables. In our scenario, we need vendor lookup and item lookup. In the standard system, item lookup opens a list showing all items for selection. Similarly, we have a vendor lookup in our screen. However, we want to filter the vendor list so that we can only see vendors assigned to our store. We do not want to see vendors that are not related to the current store. This is also another requirement. When a vendor is selected, we want the item lookup to show only items supplied by that vendor. Instead of displaying items from all vendors, the system should filter items based on the selected vendor. Now let's see how we created the vendor lookup. Go to POS panel lookup list. Here you can see we already created a vendor lookup. The lookup ID is important. In the custom command, we can either use the lookup ID directly or load it from a setup table. In this training example, we are using the lookup ID directly. Another important configuration is the data table ID. This defines the link between the lookup screen and the data source table. It also defines which fields should appear on the lookup screen. When you open the data table card, you can see the table used. In this case, we are using table 50022 store vendor link table. We configured 5 columns and 16 rows. The columns include vendor number, name, phone number, email address, and store number. On the right hand side, you can see a fixed filter. This filter controls how the system filters the data. In this instance, the vendor list is filtered by the store number. The store number comes from the POS context. POS context values are session-based values available during the POS session. Some context values are available by default. For example, the store value is available automatically in the POS context. So we can directly use the store value in the fixed filter. This ensures that the vendor list only shows vendors related to the currently logged in store. However, for custom context values, we need to explicitly set them in the POS session. For example, when we select a vendor, we set the vendor number as a context value in the POS session. Later, we use this context value in the item lookup filter. Now let's move on to item lookup. Here we also created a lookup ID. We use similar references for lookup ID and data table ID. Let me open the data table ID. Here you can see we used the standard item table. We configured 4 columns: item number, description, vendor number, and inventory. On the right hand side, you can see a filter using vendor number. This vendor number comes from the POS context that we set when selecting the vendor. When the user selects a vendor in vendor lookup, we store that vendor number in the POS session. Then when the user opens the item lookup, the system automatically reads that context value. As a result, the item list is filtered and shows only items supplied by that vendor. This improves usability and performance because users do not have to search through all items. Now let's talk about inventory column. The source expression ID triggers an event when the data loads. In that event, we can calculate values dynamically through code. In this case, we calculate the actual inventory available. Normally stores post transactions at the end of the day. So the system inventory may not always reflect real-time stock. Therefore, we calculate inventory dynamically. We calculate it as system inventory minus quantity sold but not posted. This gives us the real-time available inventory. That calculated value is then displayed in the inventory column. So this is the idea behind using the source expression ID. With that, we have completed the configuration of vendor lookup and item lookup. This concludes the design of the POS panel for the PO creation and the configuration of vendor and item lookups. Now let's see how we load this panel into POS. The first step is registering the external command. We already registered the command tr_purchase. Let me quickly open Visual Studio Code and show how the panel loading logic looks in AL code. Here you can see the purchase code unit. You can see the panel ID defined here. As I mentioned earlier, we can either define it directly in the code or store it in a setup table. First, we check whether a POS PO header staging record exists for the current POS receipt. If it does not exist, we insert a new record. Next, we create a POS context value for vendor. This context value will later be used for filtering item lookup. After that, we initialize the POS tags used in the information panel. These POS tags populates values like vendor number, document number, vendor name, etc. Finally, we load the panel. The panel loads with the context data and displays it to the user. Now the user can start performing actions. When the user clicks the TR purchase button, the panel is loaded. You can see the vendor number field is ready for selection. Now let's talk about the vendor lookup. According to our scenario, we want to select only vendors assigned to the current store. When we click vendor lookup, the vendor list opens. You can see the vendors are filtered for store number 1. This ensures only eligible vendors are displayed. Now select a vendor. You can see the vendor number, document number, and vendor name populated automatically. Next, we open the item lookup. You can see that only items associated with that vendor are displayed. Select some items and click OK. The selected items are added to the general details panel. Now you can modify the quantity. For example, you can select a product and change the quantity. You can increase the quantity to 5. We will discuss the quantity command later. Now let's review the lookup code logic. In the vendor lookup command, we define the lookup ID. Then we verify whether the lookup exists. If it exists, we load the lookup panel. Once the lookup panel is opened, we subscribe to the lookup result event. This subscriber handles the selected result. If no value is selected, we display a validation message. If a vendor is selected, we update the information panel and the staging table. Item lookup works in a similar way. We validate the lookup ID and ensure a vendor is selected first. Then we load the item lookup. After the lookup opens, the user selects items. We handle the result in the same subscriber. For vendor lookup, we allow single selection. For item lookup, we allow multiple selection. So we loop through all selected items. Each item is inserted into the POS PO line staging table with a default quantity of 1. After inserting the records, we update the data grid. Now the item appears in the POS panel. This is how vendor and item selection updates the panel dynamically. So that wraps up our part 1. You have now built a fully functional POS panel for purchase order creation. You're able to select vendors, select items, and see the data updated in the panel. In the next video, we will see how quantities, payments, vendor email retrieval from head office, purchase order posting, and printing of the purchase orders are implemented. Thank you.